Hi, I'm really excited to bring this Christ Revealed interview to you. Let's go ahead and jump in.
Rather, there was a deepening conviction that I was onto something that was really true. And see, I have to be careful even how I use the word true nowadays, because it's a relativized word, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. So when you say true or truth, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, and it's even discomforting for me to talk about my journey,
Right.
because, okay, well, that's nice. He has his journey. Now let's talk to this person over here who has a different journey,
Right.
as if all journeys are equal and just significant for individual people. Some people like one thing and not the other, and that's just all you can say about it.
Right.
It's approaching the whole enterprise like it's a dessert.
Right.
Is it ice cream, or is it cake, or is it donuts, or what is your preference here? But that's not my view at all.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what the world is actually like.
Right.
Either God exists or he doesn't.
Right.
Okay? If he doesn't, when you think about it, this has massive ramifications for the way one lives.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
If he does, well, that's the flip side now. This also has massive ramifications in another sense. So I have become convinced that Christianity is true, first from the existential kind of sense, although my sense of it being true was still the same sense I'm talking about now. True to the world, true in the sense of fact, true in the sense that if you disagree with it, then you're wrong.
Right.
That's the sense of truth that I'm talking about. Now, I could be wrong in my assessment, but I want to at least be clear in the kind of claim that I'm making. Now, it was after I became a Christian that I became familiar and acquainted with the unbelievable amount of evidence, the thinking, the thoughtful enterprise of justifying all these elements of Christianity. So I mentioned as a foundational thing God's existence. Okay, well, I can't will myself to be an atheist right now.
Right.
And the reason is I would have to make commitments to so many things that are so radically counterintuitive, that is so inconsistent with the way that I encounter the world and I discover the world, and frankly, the way almost everybody encounters and discovers the world, okay? That I just couldn't bring myself to make a claim so contrary to the obvious evidence around me, okay? And so since I have become possessed of that wonderful information, this has really created a much more solid foundation for me as a follower of Christ. In so many different areas, I can speak to the challenges that people have raised. My daughter, who's now 12 years old, but when she was about 7 years old, she was baptized as a 6-year-old, as a Christian. So she believed in Jesus. But when she was 7 or maybe 8, she said, "Papa, why do we believe God is true?" It was kind of her way of saying, how do we know God's actually real? I believe he's real, but how do we know it?
Right.
So now she's asking a question that goes from belief that to confidence in the belief. That's knowledge, okay?
Right.
Reasons for it. Well, see, now I have to answer my youngster in a way that she can understand, but it's substantive. And I thought about it for a few minutes, and this phrase came to my mind, and I realized when it came to mind, and then I told it to her, that it really captured my whole approach to this entire enterprise. I said, "Honey, the reason that we believe that God is true is because he's the best explanation for the way things are."
Right.
He's the best explanation for the way things are. In other words, there's explanatory power in the Christian worldview. It helps us make sense of the whole world.
No, and this is the interesting thing, is that you're talking about a rational approach. You're basically saying that reason supports your view, not that you have to cast away reason in order to adopt it.
Right.
And quite frankly, as you just described, an atheistic point of view for you would be irrational.
Yeah, I just would take exception with the phrase "for you," because that could sound like a relativistic one. I am convinced that it is irrational. I can give you the reasons why I think that it falls so far short of the evidence and of good reason.
Yeah.
In that sense, yes.
And we talk about relative truth is sort of a contradiction in terms, right?
It's a misuse of the word truth. Classically, truth meant that your beliefs fit the way the world actually is.
Right.
And so if your truth is relative to you, then all you're saying is you're reducing the word truth to mere belief.
Right.
But you're not answering the question of whether your beliefs are actually so.
Yeah.
That is actually true.
Yeah. Yeah, which is where it seems like those two things can't be used together.
They're
incompatible. Yeah.
This is the trend,
Yeah.
and I want to reverse the trend because I don't think it is an accurate characterization of the way Christianity has dealt with those ideas over the last 2,000 years. Okay, and I don't think it serves us well as human beings trying to make sense out of our world.
Right.
You know, if you think about it, when you say, well, that's your truth, and you believe something opposite, that's your truth, that's patronizing.
Right.
Because what it's saying is, your beliefs are false.
Right.
But you believe them, and I'll smile and nod my head and patronize you about your, and it's almost condescending, about your belief. But it's not really true. Don't act like this is reality. No, it's not. So now what sounds like a very tolerant approach really turns out, in fact, to be something that's rather condescending. And my feeling is, why don't we just man up to this and say, I think I'm right, you think you're right. Nothing wrong with that, but we can't both be right because we disagree. So let's try to figure out who's actually right. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe somebody else is right. But let's not patronize each other by saying, oh, that's your truth, isn't that nice? I have my truth, and now what?
Yeah, and that could lead to a pretty bad place, right? I mean, if you think about it, because if truth can be relative, then can't morality be relative too? And then if you have, and that way it's kind of a moral blank check to say,
listen. Well, see, now you're onto something. I mean, this is the kind of thinking people ought to be doing,
right?
Because they think, well, okay, morality is relative. That's good, because then if I'm sleeping with my girlfriend, then you have no grounds to object.
Right.
Oh, right. Okay. But then I have no grounds to object to the war in Vietnam.
Right.
Which was my situation. I was a relativist when I was a non-Christian in the university. I didn't want anybody telling me who I can sleep with, but I wanted to tell somebody else who they could fight with. That was an immoral war. Well, wait a minute. If there is no morality, then what are my grounds for objecting against the war in Vietnam or any other hot button issue that is popular with a lot of people that otherwise would consider themselves relativists? Think of it this way, Patrick. Lots of people want to be relativists. They don't want people to be relativists towards them. Right. They want them to be virtuous, And so it's an all or nothing enterprise if we're going to be intellectually honest.
Right.
If there is no objective morality, then there's no objective morality.
Right.
Then you can't say something like morals are relative, therefore it's wrong for you to push your morality on me.
Right.
Well, it can't be wrong to do that. That's a contradiction there. And you can't start complaining about the problem of evil, which pretty much everybody has that complaint, and I understand it, because I think there is real evil in the world. But if relativism is true, that eviscerates the charge. There can't be any real evil in the world if there's no morality to define departures from good, which we call evil. So yeah, there's a poison pill in there that a lot of people are not aware of.
And this is where it really kind of, I think the rubber meets the road in many respects, because it's, culturally, what are conclusions that we draw? That's right. How do we argue for them? And how do we guide our lives, and et cetera, based on all this? And so this is really very philosophical in nature, right? It's adopting a view of reality, having your rules of evidence, and then figuring out, okay, what's the right way to behave based on all of this?
Sure. Well, it's a philosophical way kind of discussing it as we're knocking it around, because we're trying to be careful and clear about these things, and we're trying to be intentional about addressing these things. But the fact is, every human being goes through this process in some way or another, maybe not with some of the terms that we're using, but they're trying to figure out what is the good, after all, and what makes the good good.
Right.
If you think of politics, politics are an exercise of the appropriate use of power.
Right.
So politicians or political institutions have power. What is the right way for them to use the power? Notice the moral term that just snuck into our conversation. Right. But this is something that people are asking all the time. So we talk about rights. Rights at their heart are moral claims.
Yes.
Because when I claim to have a right, I am also expressing simultaneously a moral obligation that you have to act towards me in a certain way. People talk about rights claims all the time, but they aren't thinking about the moral dimension. So what I'm saying is, in a certain sense, the moral life is part of the human condition. We are human beings that are built this way uniquely, which I think is another another evidence for the Christian worldview, because we are able to make sense out of that. We're made in the image of God. We are separate in a very vital way from everything else that's been made, all other sentient creatures. But this is the human condition. This is the way we operate. This is the way we work. We can't get away from these things. And so a lot of my project here with understanding Christianity is to try to engage people on that level. Even though I've got advanced degrees in theology and philosophy, I don't want to blind people with philosophy. I want to talk to them and say, look, these are things that you address all the time. And you know what? If we talked for a little while, just about whatever, I'd hear things in your conversation that betrayed deep convictions you have about the world.
Right.
For example, you'll say to your kids, don't treat each other like animals. Why do you say that? If we're just animals, and let's say the Darwinian project tells the whole story, why not treat other people like animals? See, I think that people say this because they have an intuitive sense that man is special in the system in a way that no materialistic, Darwinistic schema can account for.
Right.
We can account for that. So here we are. Annabeth, my daughter, it's the best explanation for the way things are. And there are dozens and dozens of things like that that come up naturally in people's conversation that they don't think about making sense of in light of a bigger picture of the world. And I'm just trying to connect the dots for people, because I'm convinced that Christianity properly understood really is true. The biblical worldview is the story of reality,
right.
Okay? And I think that I can give people good reason to at least see how that's the case. Whether they fully invest themselves in it is another matter. But that's between them and God.
Thanks so much for joining us for this interview, for taking this Christ Revealed journey with us. Remember, if you haven't already, subscribe. That way you'll get notified about all the new content that's coming down the road. Comment. People want to hear from you, and then maybe you'll encourage somebody else to make a comment. If you did like it so other people know that it's something good for them to watch. And finally, share this. Send links to other people that you know and care about. Cost you nothing but maybe a few seconds of your time, but it might have a massive impact on their life. Anyway, really excited to be able to share this information with you. Thanks for tuning in.